So our next item is rules for residential development, regulation, incentives, and guidelines.
Yes. All right. Well, this is a follow-up from the joint meeting that we had with the City Council and Planning Commission on May 2nd. So here's the outline of what I'm going to talk about and would like your feedback on. Could we ask folks to take their conversations outside, please? Excuse me. Thank you. First, I'm going to recap the May 2nd joint study session, make sure we got it, that you heard the same thing that we heard. Secondly, go over the proposals that staff has come up with as a result of that feedback. And then third, go into the development bonus system in a little more detail. Questions have arisen about whether this would impact our housing element and the ability to meet our regional housing need allocation. We don't believe it will, but I'm going to show you that analysis. And then finally, we have 6 discussion questions that we would like your feedback on. And of course, anything else you want to tell us in this regard. So first of all, recapping the May 2nd joint study session. As you recall, there was a series of questions, discussion questions that we asked the Commission and Council. So I'm just going to briefly recap what those questions were and what the answers were that we heard. First question was, should a minimum percentage of 2 and more bedroom and or 3 or more bedroom units be required in residential projects? The answer was yes. 50% 2 or more bedroom units, which would include 10% 3 or more bedroom units. And it was also suggested that maybe the percentages should be even higher to make up for past deficits, and perhaps that could be considered as a bonus item. Second, should 2 or more bedroom units be required to comply with the family-friendly design guidelines? And if so, should this also apply to additional 2 or more bedroom units that are not required? The answer was yes. All 2 or more bedroom units should be required to comply, and also the guidelines should include provisions for breaking up larger residential projects into smaller communities around common open space. Should minimum unit sizes be established? If so, what sizes? No, this has not been a problem, and the guidelines provide de facto minimums. Should there be any exceptions to the requirements for unit mix, family-friendly design, and minimum unit size? If so, what should be the basis for such exceptions? The response to this was it should be considered on a case-by-case basis depending on the circumstances. Should the provision of affordable housing and or ownership housing be made a prerequisite for earning a development bonus? The answer to that was yes. Should the base levels of floor area ratio, height, and residential density be lowered to require more projects to earn development bonuses? Again, the response was yes. What is the appropriate mix of rental and ownership housing? Should all projects needing bonuses be required to be ownership? There was no clear direction on this question. There did appear to be a general desire for more ownership housing. However, there's also a desire to protect renters and to provide affordable housing at all levels, which comes more in rental projects than it does in ownership projects. What percentage of units at various levels of affordability should be required for rental and ownership projects? Should this be proportional to the level of bonus being requested? Again, there was no clear direction on this. However, the Commission and Council did appear to favor affordable units at various income levels and proportional to our arena allocations, and in increasing amounts for more bonus points. So in other words, the more bonus points you need, the higher percentage of affordable units you'd have to provide. What other changes to the bonus point system are desired? Again, we got no clear direction. It was referred to the Planning Commission for further discussion and direction. There was a general sense that many of the categories could be eliminated. However, there was a desire to keep the bonus for zero net energy and also the flexible public benefit. It was noted that the bonus point system needs to address both residential and non-residential projects, and that the city's bonus system should be designed to be more attractive to developers than the state density bonus law. That's something we're still working on. We don't have anything specific for you tonight, but our sense is that it would be. So, with that direction, which is what we think we heard from the Commission and Council, staff has come up with proposals for all of these areas. So what we propose in unit mix is that there would be a basic requirement that all residential projects that are 10 units or more, whether or not they require bonuses, would be required to have at least 50% 2 or more bedroom units, which would include at least 10% 3 or more bedroom units. Again, this could be 40% 2s and 10% 3s, or 35% 2s and 15% 3s, or whatever. Secondly, for a bonus, additional 2 and 3 bedroom units would be required for bonus points. Well, see below it says that was obviously cut and pasted out of the staff report, or out of something. Anyway, it's up to a maximum of 60% 2 or more bedroom units, which would include a maximum of 12% 3 or more bedroom units. That's our proposal. As to design guidelines, all residential projects must comply with the Emeryville design guidelines for residential building and use types. In other words, the design guidelines are divided into different sections, and they have different sections for different uses. So there's a section for commercial buildings, and a section for office buildings, and a section for residential buildings. So all residential projects would have to comply with the section on residential buildings. And this means things like community rooms and other such things that apply to all residential projects. In addition, all 2 and more bedroom units, which includes 3 or more bedroom units, whether required or not, will have to comply with the Emeryville Design Guideline section on family-friendly residential building and use types. That's a subsection of the residential section. The design guidelines that, as I previously mentioned, were approved by the City Council on May 19th were modified to call for the smaller communities centered around common open space in large residential projects, 100 plus units, it says. With regard to exceptions, we think a provision should be added somewhere to allow deviations from the design guidelines on a case-by-case basis, and that would be considered by the Planning Commission or the City Council, as the case may be, as part of the major design review and or major conditional use permit for the project. They'd have to make their case. They'd have to convince you of why they needed this deviation. For the FAR height and residential density, the base levels should be dropped and the bonus levels should remain the same. This will require a general plan amendment. The base levels should be about 50% of the bonus levels, which is what was illustrated at the May 2nd meeting. By the way, the May 2nd staff report is attached to this staff report in your packet, so you can refer to that if you wish. There's a diagram in there that shows an example of this for FAR, I think. And the 0.5 to no bonus FAR in the eastern residential neighborhoods would be replaced with 0.5 to 1.0 FAR. This is to solve the problem of you can get a density bonus, but you can't get an FAR bonus, so therefore you end up with little tiny units. So this would allow the units to be of a reasonable size. As for affordable housing, in-project affordable units would be required for bonus points. The percent of affordable units required should increase as the bonus points increase. For rental projects, very low, low, and moderate income units should be required, and they should be proportional to our RENA allocations. For ownership projects, all the affordable units should be moderate income. Regarding ownership housing, and I'll talk more about that in a minute when I get to the bonus point system, or to the bonus system. For ownership housing, we would propose that to obtain bonus points, any residential project that requires bonus points would be required to record a condominium map. However, they would not necessarily be required to sell the condominiums. So they could operate it as a rental project if they chose, but it would technically be condos, so that in the future, if it was decided to sell units, that could be done. It would already be in place. So the developer may opt to either retain ownership of all the units and operate it as a rental project, or to sell the units and turn it into an ownership project. If it's a rental project, if it's operated as a rental project, then the rental affordability requirements would apply. That is low, very low, low, and moderate. If it is ownership, then the condominium affordability requirements would apply, that is, moderate income units. There would be conditions, covenants, and restrictions required, and they'd be required to stipulate that at least 50% of the units must be owner-occupied at any given time, and no more than 10% of the units may be owned by a single owner. We understand that these two things are red flags that the FHA looks at in terms of providing financing for projects. They don't like it if you have more than 50% of your units rented out, and they don't like it if one entity owns more than 10% of the units.
Is there any way of enforcing that?
Well,
Is there a history of it?
I'm not aware of a history of it. It would, like most things, it would be on a complaint basis or a case-by-case basis. We'd hear about it, and then we'd have to go after them. And we also think that this condition could be put on all condominium applications, whether or not a development bonus is needed. So just kind of parenthetically there, we would add this to our condominium section of our subdivision regulations.
Before you move on, is that going to encourage more condos or discourage more condos if we do something like this?
Well, if a project requires bonus points, it would have to be condos. They wouldn't have a choice. I mean, they'd have to map a condo, and it would have to have these CC&Rs, even if they operated as rental. In terms of projects that don't require bonus points, I don't know that this would encourage them to become condominiums, but we're not getting any condominiums now anyway. I think that's more dictated by the market. My sense is that if there's a strong market for condominiums, that something like this isn't going to deter them, but I don't really know.
Does this conflict with...
It sounds like the second bullet is conflicting with the CC&R bullet, that these things, it sounds like you can't have a project operated as a rental project if you're requiring them to file a condo, with the CC&R saying that you can't have more than 10% ownership.
We have to work out the details of this. It's possible that maybe the CC&R's condition doesn't take effect until they decide they want to start selling units.
That would have to, you'd have to, right?
Then that's when they have to form a homeowners association, and that's when they have to have CC&Rs. So I suspect the way we would write it is that the CC&R condition would be a condition of when they decide to start selling units.
And so the rental for a project that's mapped as condos that is rental, that is operated as rental, you would be able to have the very low, that spread.
Yes,
okay.
yes. We already have that in our affordable housing program section of our code. Then when if they decide to turn a rental project into an ownership project, in other words, start selling the units, the condominium conversion requirements would kick in. Today, the way our code is written, technically, if something is already condominiums, and has been since the get-go, but they've been operating it as a rental project, and then they start selling the units, such as what happened at Bridgewater, technically that's not a conversion because it was already condominiums, so the condominium conversion ordinance doesn't apply, which means that the rental tenant protections don't apply. So all of the things that we have in our condo conversion ordinance that are intended to protect and assist the rental tenants are not there if you're just selling units that have always been condos. So we would modify that provision of the code to say that those provisions do apply if you decide to start selling units in a project that's been rented all these years.
Well, is that going to conflict with the bullet above it, which says they can't own more than 10% of the units? There'd have to be some...
No, that's after. I mean, Commissioner Donaldson's correct. That the CC&R condition would not kick in until they decided to start selling units.
Oh, but even then, they're going to own more than 10% of the units.
Till all of them. Till 90% of them are sold.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to write it in such a way that this is after they're all sold.
Right.
After they're sold by the developer.
So they have 2 years to sell them or something like that, or?
I guess so. Yeah, we'd have to.
I think your intention is good and that you need to work out the language
It's
for
a
it.
detail we have to work out. Yeah, you know what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
It takes a while to move people out when you.
Right. So with regard to the bonus system, residential projects of 10 or more units needing bonus points should be required to provide both both affordable in-unit affordable units, in-project affordable units, and additional 2 or more bedroom units. Now, this could be a 2-tiered system where, say, the first 50 points are earned by providing the affordable units and the extra 2 or more bedroom units, and then the additional points up to 100 are provided for additional community benefits. It could also be a 1-tier system where the whole thing is just based on affordable units and additional 2 or more bedroom units. For non-residential projects needing bonus points, we could still continue to require community benefits, although the list could be abbreviated, which we are proposing, and you'll see that in a minute. We could also have a 2-tier system for non-residential projects whereby the first 50 points, again, are based on affordable housing, but obviously non-residential projects don't have units in them. So what we could do would be to increase the affordable housing fee that they would have to pay above the base of $4 per square foot. So right now the affordable housing fee is $4 per square foot for non-residential. And if they need bonus points, we could say, well, you have to pay a bigger affordable housing fee. As pointed out in the staff report, the Nexus study that we had done for non-residential supports fees of way more than $4 a square foot for pretty much every use. So we would be well within our authority to charge higher fees for that in exchange for bonus points. And
Given that the fees would be required as part of the bonus rather than just flat out required, or would they even need to be tied to the Nexus study?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it helps that the fee is well below what the Nexus study supports.
Okay.
I think it'd be a little dicey to try to charge a higher fee than what the Nexus study says is justifiable, although your point is well taken that it is a bonus.
So before we move on from that, just so I understand, we have a fee already in place.
Correct.
And so what we would be doing is adding more money to that fee to buy bonus points, so to speak.
Correct.
Okay, and so we're just saying somewhere above what the current level is.
Yeah, and I'll
it could be
show you-
6, it could be 8.
Yeah, I'll show you a chart that kind of starts to get at that. Thing is, it's really kind of picking a number out of the air because these fees are so much below what the Nexus study supports that it's sort of a policy call as to where you want to set it at. But again, it would be proportional to the number of points that they would need. The more points, the more they'd have to pay. And then if we did a 2-tier system, then we're suggesting that the additional housing fee could be up to 50 points again, and then if they need more than 50 points, they get the additional points by providing community benefits.
Charles, what are you proposing for projects with less than 10 units? Like residential projects with less than 10 units?
Let's see. Chances are a residential project with less than 10 units would not need any bonus points anyway. Less than 10 units would not kick in the unit mix requirement. Basically, they wouldn't have any specific requirements for less than 10 units. I mean,
But they'd still have the bonus point system.
I have to think about that a little bit. We hadn't really considered it. We don't have a whole lot of projects that are less than 10 units. I mean, sometimes you get things that are 2 units, like the Doyle Street project, 2 or 3. But
And that's that's one of the areas, I think I brought it up in the joint session that we had, the possibility of changing the medium density residential to a 1 FAR with bonus points. In that area, you're not going to have a 10-unit project. You're probably going to have a 2-unit project, and so there, I'm just trying to get, trying to understand the,
Well, let me point out that currently, and this was something that was vetted when we were developing the new planning regulations a few years ago, and most of you will probably remember this. It was decided that in the RM medium density residential zone, which is basically the eastern residential neighborhoods, that bonus points in general are not required. Because it seemed like those projects are of such a small scale that the amount of public benefit that they would provide would be minimal. And so in those neighborhoods, to get a bonus, it simply is a series of findings. The commission has to make findings that the project is, a benefit to the neighborhood and all those normal kinds of findings. So right now there are no bonuses, no bonus points required at all. And that basically encompasses projects of 10 units or fewer. So that was kind of our thinking going forward, that if a residential project is 10 units, is less than 10 units, and it needs bonuses, it would just need to make some findings, not any necessarily community benefits. Part of the thing is, if you have a requirement for 50% 2 or more bedroom and 10% 3 or more bedroom, how do you apply that to a 6-unit project?
I'm not going there, but I'm just going the other.
It just seemed too complicated to try to burden these little projects with this bonus system. It's not too complicated, though, for the big guys that have 100 or 200 unit projects.
But for the one where you're talking about changing the FAR from 0.5 to 0.5 to 1, those would be those smaller projects. So we would be making findings that they provide some kind of, that they're good for the neighborhood or something.
Right. That's right. That's right. Like the Doyle Street lofts project. I think that needed a bonus for density, if I recall correctly. So findings had to be made. There were no bonus points. It was just findings. Right. So let's see. Is that it for this? Mixed-use projects. Mixed-use projects are a little bit of a head-scratcher, but after thinking about it, what we came up with is we'll just treat them as residential projects. If they have a residential component, we'll calculate the density, the FAR, and the height limit based on the whole project, figure out how many bonus points it needs, and then the residential piece of it has to provide the units that are necessary to get bonus points. So that's basically how we solved that one. And then, finally, the state density bonus law. I alluded to this earlier. Developers would have a choice between that and our bonus system, but not both, and we will try to design ours so that it's more attractive than the state. And we'll be working on.
How does that stand now? Nobody uses the state?
We've never had anybody use the state density bonus law here in Emeryville that I'm aware of. Certainly not in the 15 years I've been here. And it happens occasionally in other cities, but not very often. So we think it shouldn't be too hard to design something that's more attractive than that. All right, now on to the development bonus system. This is kind of the thorny issue that we didn't have a chance to get to on May 2nd. First, before we talk about the proposal, I'd like to just briefly go through the history. How did we get this development bonus system that people are now saying is antiquated? Which is fine, it's a different day. But I just want to briefly remind everybody how we got here. So in 1988, the city adopted a new zoning ordinance, and that contained tiered height limits and residential densities. For the height limits, it had 40 to 55 feet, 55 to 80 feet, and 95 to 175 feet. And there were findings that were required to improve the extra height, but things like, compatible with the neighborhood and things like that. For residential density, in 3 of the zoning districts, there were tiered densities. In the RM zone, it was 20 to 45 units to the acre. That's now been reduced to 20 to 35. In the RH zone, the high-density residential zone, it was 45 to 108 units to the acre. And in the mixed-use zone, MU, it was 45 to 60 units to the acre. Now, there was also an automatic 25% density bonus for providing affordable housing, and this was before the Palmer former decision, so every project had to include affordable housing, which means that every project automatically got a 25% density bonus. So that in the MU zone, which is where most of the projects were located, that got you up to 75 units to the acre. The increased height and density required a conditional use permit with some additional findings, but projects typically already required a conditional use permit for their use. So the increased height and density kind of became de facto limits, and they were all rolled into a single use permit application for the project. Numerous projects with additional height and or density were approved during the 21 years that these regulations were in effect, with no discrete, identified public benefits being provided. So eventually questions arose as to what benefits the community was getting in return for all this increased development potential. Community benefits in exchange for development bonuses became a major topic of discussion in the general plan update and in the new planning regulations. The new general plan that was adopted in 2009 has language in it and a policy about developing a bonus point system of community benefits in exchange for these development bonuses. The interim zoning regulations, which were in effect from 2009 to 2013, had a qualitative bonus system, not a point system, requiring that 3 public benefits be provided in order to earn the full bonus, or you could get 1/3 of the bonus for each benefit that you provided. There were 13 categories of public benefits plus the undefined alternative public benefit. 2 projects were approved with bonuses under this system. They were the Emery Station West Transit Center project and the City Storage project. Then in 2013, the planning regulations were adopted, and they have a quantitative point-based bonus system. As you know, there are now 18 categories of public benefits plus the undefined flexible public benefit. And under this system, 3 projects with bonuses have been approved. Those include the intersection mixed-use project at 3800 San Pablo, the ECCL project, and the EAH Affordable Housing project, which you all just approved in January of this year. In your staff report on page 6, there is a table that gives a little more detail about these 5 projects, and it says exactly how many bonus points they needed and what the bonus point categories were that they got and so forth. So, continuing on with this history, currently we have 3 major development projects being processed. Sherwin-Williams will definitely need bonus points, as currently designed under the current system. The Anton Emeryville, or Nady site project, does not need bonus points under its as currently designed under the current system. However, if the base levels are lowered, then it will need some bonus points. Not 100, but it will need some. The Marketplace redevelopment project, part of which you just approved, is a PUD that was approved in 2008, so the FAR height and density are already entitled for that PUD, so no bonuses are required for that. In January, the City Council had a study session on the Sherwin-Williams project, and that led to a desire to overhaul the bonus point system. So that's kind of where we are and how we got there. This is our current bonus point system. There are 18 categories of public benefits. They're listed here, along with the flexible public benefit, which has no specific point value. It's up to the Planning Commission or City Council to decide how many points whatever benefit the applicant comes up with are worth, up to 100. And each category has varying values of maximum points from 20 to 50. Most of them are 35, the idea being that you would have to get at least 3 public benefit categories in order to get the full 100 points. After what we've heard about the bonus point system, we have a somewhat drastic proposal, I would say, which is this. We would propose to eliminate all but 5 of these 18 categories, plus keeping the flexible public benefit. And small business, which is now 35 points, we would up to 50. The others we're proposing to keep are already 50. So the 5 we would propose to keep are public open space, alternative energy, but only the provision of that is for zero net energy, public improvements, utility undergrounding, and small businesses. Small businesses is a contribution to a small business fund, which would help to replace the money we used to have under redevelopment for things like facade improvement grants and low interest business loans and things like that.
So that's not small business space in a residential building?
No, we debated whether we should do that. It just seemed to be too difficult to implement and enforce. You know, how do you ensure 20 years down the road that they still have a small business in that space? It seemed a lot easier and cleaner and frankly better for everybody if they just give us money.
Yeah.
And we can use that money to benefit small businesses.
But on that, couldn't it be managed like we do affordable housing? And why would that be any more difficult? Because I think this is a problem we need to address, is because businesses get displaced, and then they can't come back because they can't afford the rent. So if we had a place that was affordable rent for small businesses, and it was just made that way, like the Artist Lofts or any place else, then, and just made sure that it stayed within the confines of what we would decide as a small business, maybe,
Like
you know, we'd have to
sort of
define
like
that.
BMRs for small business?
What's that?
Sort of like BMRs for small business?
Exactly, because we find that when we put money into affordable housing, it takes a long time and a lot of money before we can actually build that affordable housing. But if we had the housing in the stock already, it's a lot easier. And this kind of seems the same way. I'm thinking of long ago when it was the pasta company that in the flower shop that used to be at the empty site B. And we lost those two businesses. And they were really kind of unique and fun businesses. And had they had an opportunity to go into someplace else that's rent controlled, so to speak, then they could still be here today. So that's just the question.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's something that could always be considered under the flexible public benefit too. I mean, I think it's something that, you know, like I would hope most planning commissions in the future would really be excited about.
Let me just note that we kind of had this debate when this system was put together, and the small business, what I'm describing now, is what we already have. That's the provision we already have in our bonus system. The only change here would be that it would be increased from 35 to 50 points. So, but that's your point is well taken. I mean, I would say though that the affordable housing program is not easy to administer. It's a lot of work, and we don't we lost a lot when redevelopment went away. We used to be able to provide assistance to small businesses. We really can't anymore because we don't have any money for it. So that's really the idea here. Anyway, so this is our proposal. I mean, if you like, I can walk through all the categories we've deleted and why we deleted them, but maybe we can come back to that if you probably don't want to hear that right now.
Or I have maybe it's the opposite question.
Okay.
Most of these categories that were deleted, I mean, they seem like they're categories that could easily be indoctrinated or incentivized through other means. And the one that isn't deleted that seems that it could also be is number 3. And so I'm just wondering why number 3 was not deleted.
It was not deleted because we heard loud and clear at the joint meeting on May 2nd that there was a desire to retain it. Only the zero net energy, though, not the entire alternative energy provision. The way it's written now is you get a certain number of bonus points for every % by which you exceed the California Building Code energy efficiency requirements or something. And there's also a provision that you can get a full 50 points if you design your project to be totally zero net energy. And I believe it was the mayor who said that she wanted to keep that provision. So, I mean, obviously, it's whatever 3 council members will vote for, you know, but that's why we left it in there.
Is that the only bonus category that would be sort of all or nothing? Are all of the other ones on a scale?
Yeah, I guess that's true. I hadn't thought about that, but that's true. That one is an all or nothing. The others are on a scale. So the idea here would be that if we had a 2-tiered system, say, for residential projects, then they'd have to earn their first 50 points by providing the affordable housing. And if they didn't need any more than 50 points, then they'd never even get to this chart. But if they needed 100 points, then they'd have to figure out a way to provide 50 additional points from these categories, which could be all in one category, or they could do 25 points in public improvements and 25 points in public open space, or something like that. Anything that adds up to another 50 points. But you're right, Chair Moss, this one would be, if you did this, you just get 50 points. And if you don't do it, you get 0 points. So, yeah.
Is that doable?
I don't know. People claim it is.
Rarely, but
Zero.
occasionally.
Yeah,
I believe
I've
there's-
seen, I mean, it's zero net energy is possible. It's not. Yeah,
I
it's not
believe the
easy.
Is it
state,
done anywhere?
I believe the state has a goal of having that as a building code requirement by 2030. So that's,
I
you
guess,
know,
yeah, I mean, I guess my thought was a lot of these other sustainability related items could be modifications to our own codes and not bonus points. And
Exactly.
I don't know. It just seems like it's the odd one out with regard.
oh, zero net energy?
Yeah.
Well, I guess the thinking is that that is so far above and beyond what a current code would require that if you're gonna go to that length to design your project that way, you ought to get something for it.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
that's
I
the
agree that the technology isn't all the way there, that it makes it easy for every project. But I think for people to be incentivized to create new technologies or to try new technologies, they need some payback for that. You know, they're taking the risks, so what do they get for that? But once we get there to where the technology, you know, batteries are a lot longer lived or something like that, then we can kind of maybe change it later on.
Obviously, in 2030, we will be back in front of you, and I'm sure we'll all still be here to recommend deleting this one because it'll be a requirement at that point.
Well, yeah, actually, on that, I mean, is there any sort of language in here that you know, if any of these ever became a requirement at a state level or something like that, that they go away as a bonus?
Well, there isn't any language at all yet. Well, you mean in the current system?
Yeah, in the current system. Or,
No. It's, well, I think how it's worded is, well, for example, the alternative energy condition, the way it's worded now, is that you get points for the percentage above by which you exceed state requirements. So if the state requirements go up, then the baseline above which you have to, you know, exceed in order to get points goes up. If it gets to the point where the state requires, you know, zero net energy, then there's no place to go. There's no additional points you could possibly get. So I think it's kind of automatic, really.
Yeah.
That would
Okay.
work. So moving on to I'll try to wrap this up here. Almost done. So this is kind of the heart of this proposal. I know it looks kind of complicated, but this table is what we're suggesting. Now the numbers may change a bit. The numbers themselves are not exactly nailed down, but as an illustration, this is an example of what the bonus point table could look like if we have a two-tier system, and this is for residential. How many affordable units you have to provide in order to earn varying amounts of bonus points, and what your unit mix has to be in order to earn those bonus points. So on the left-hand column here, we have increments of 5 points from 5 up to 50. And then across we have how many total, for rental, we have how many total affordable units you'd have to provide, and that's broken down then by very low, low, and moderate. For ownership, it's just moderate. And then over here on the right-hand side, we have how many 2 or more bedrooms, which would include the 3 or more bedrooms that you have to provide in order to earn various bonus points. And that applies to both rental and ownership projects. So, and these numbers, the very low, low, and moderate percentages here are proportional to our RENA percentages. So, as an example, let's suppose you have a residential project that required 30 bonus points. If it's rental, they would have to provide 16% affordable units, of which 3.6 would have to be very low, 5.6 low, 6.8 moderate. So if it was a 200 unit project, 32 of those units would have to be affordable. 7 would be very low, 11 would be low, and 13 would be moderate. That should add up to 32, I hope. If it were an ownership project, then 32% of the units would have to be affordable at the moderate income level. So if it's a 200-unit project, that's 64 units. In both cases, it would have to have 56% 2 or more bedroom units, and of which 11.2% would have to be 3 or more bedroom. Okay, so you'll notice the 2 or more bedroom goes up by 1 percentage point for each 5 bonus points, and the 3 or more bedroom goes up by 0.2% for every 5 bonus points. If you had a project that required 50 points or more than 50 points, say 100 points, they would have to provide, they need 50 points from this table, which means 20% affordable units for a rental project, of which 4.5% are very low, 7% are low, 8.5% are moderate. So again, for a 200-unit project, you'd have 40 units, 9 very low, 14 low, and 17 moderate. And for an ownership project, it would be 40% of the units at moderate income level, so that'd be 80 units of a 200-unit project. The 2 or more bedroom unit count would have to be 60% of the total, and of that, 12% of the total would have to be 3 or more bedroom. If it project only needed 50 points, then this is all they'd have to do. If a project needed more than 50 points, then on top of this, they'd also have to provide some community benefits based on the table we just looked at. Now, this is a little more complicated, I think, but this is a kind of a start, anyway, at looking at how it could work for non-residential projects. If we want to make it a two-tiered system where they have to pay an additional affordable housing impact fee, we could base that on an additional 10 cents per square foot, 20 cents, 30 cents, 40 cents, 50 cents, whatever. You can come up with whatever numbers you want here. But we just plug those numbers in just to see what it would look like. So just as an example, the current fee is $4 a square foot. If you set it at 10 cents per square foot extra per bonus point, is that right? So yeah, so 10 cents times 10 points is $1, right? So $1 plus $4 is $5. The $4 is the base that they all have to pay, and then it would be $1 extra for getting your 10 bonus points. So that would be $5 per square foot for your project. Now, if for a really big project, that has a lot of square footage, that can add up to a lot of money. And using the same, algorithm, if you go down to, if they need 50 bonus points at 10 cents at 10 cents per point per square foot, that's a total of $9 a square foot. That's $4 base that's already required plus $5 more per square foot. Similarly, if you use 20%, then it goes up, to $14. 30 cents goes up to $19. 40 cents goes up to $24 a foot. 50 cents would be $29 a foot. So that's a pretty hefty increase.
So you're asking us which column we like?
Sure.
So based on that, if looking at the matrix that we came up with, or the LexisNexis, what dollar figure did that indicate? Is it still over 29?
Oh, yeah. Wait, yeah. Let me see.
244 for a non-residential, right?
Right. Let me find it
For
here.
a retail restaurant, and $66.80 for
Right. Let me
RD.
let me say that for the benefit of the audience. The Affordable Housing Nexus study prepared for non-residential projects identified maximum supportable fees ranging from $66.80, that was the low end, for R&D, up to $244.90 per square foot for retail restaurant mix. So $29,
It's pretty low.
well below that.
So what is
But
the
it-
basis for calling it supportable? I mean,
Excuse me?
the maximum supportable fees is supportable how?
Oh, well, I mean, there's a methodology that I can't, there's a methodology that the consultants used to calculate how much various non-residential uses would need to pay to fully pay for the affordable housing demand that they create. So you can't require them to pay a fee that's higher than the affordable housing demand that they create.
Right.
And so the methodology, which frankly I don't completely understand, but the methodology that they used came up with these as the maximum fees to fully pay for all the affordable housing that those uses create.
Okay.
So this is,
I get that.
these are well below those numbers.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, but it's still, you have to think about it in comparison to also to the traffic impact fee and the park impact fee, because these are not the only impact fees. And believe me, our impact fees now are a lot higher than they used to be, and we've had some people kind of freaking out at the front counter under our current fees, you know, when we show them what their fee for their project is going to be.
How do they relate to surrounding cities?
Well, if you recall, when we brought the fees to you for consideration last year, they were pretty equivalent. The total fee burden, we looked at the total fee burden, which includes building permits and everything. With the addition of our development impact fees, we're pretty comparable to other jurisdictions. You know, but we're talking about bonus points here. So, you know, I don't know what's reasonable. Personally, I'm kind of inclined to the 10 cents, but it could be more than that.
Well, I guess as as we did that study, or there was that analysis when we were talking about impact fees and comparing it to other cities, has there been any analysis with regard to these bonus points, and at what point we just are de facto downzoning our city because nobody's going to be going for the bonus points? Like, is there? That's, I guess, the question.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, as far as I know, we're the only city that uses a bonus point system, at least in this area. I'm not familiar with other bonus point systems in the area. I know that Berkeley has some kind of a community benefit requirement for buildings in the downtown area, at least, but from everything I've heard, it's very non-specific. It just says you want to build a big building, you got to provide some community benefits, and then the decision makers get to decide just kind of what's enough, you know?
I think Oakland's working on it too.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. But there's a cautionary tale. You're probably familiar with the Gaia building, where they required as a community benefit the provision of a nonprofit bookstore on the ground floor in exchange for additional height, and the building got built, and before it was finished, the bookstore went out of business, and they never got there. Then the community benefit never materialized, but they already had the tall building in place. So, you got to be cognizant of that kind of thing.
Instead.
Anyway, just to wrap up.
Charlie, could
yes.
we go back to the slide before this one? Can you explain the ownership versus rental affordable unit percentage? It looks to me like the percentage of ownership might be too high. Is that, or what is the methodology or the thinking behind that?
This is something that I need to have double checked, but basically what we did was to try to using the table that we have that shows what the maximum rent can be that people at these different levels can pay for different size units, and then adjusting that for what we would expect a normal unit mix to be. We calculated what the average, and then comparing that to what the market price of a unit of the same size would be. We calculated the subsidy that each unit would have. So, for example, a moderate income unit has a subsidy of a certain amount. A low income unit has a bigger subsidy, and a very low income unit has an even bigger subsidy. So, calculating what the total subsidy would be for all of these percentages of units across here, I believe roughly equals what the subsidy would be for 40% moderate income units. So I know the numbers don't look like they add up, but this is 20% and this is 40%. But the subsidy for a very low income unit is much higher than the subsidy for a moderate income unit. So the very low and the low get weighted heavier than the moderate does.
I
Does
guess
that make
maybe I
sense?
was more looking at the ownership side of the affordable units, because it's hard to get any kind of ownership development at all in the city. So
Well, I mean, we would require a condo map, but they wouldn't necessarily have to operate it as condos. But, I mean, our base requirement for ownership is 20%
okay.
already. So we're just starting at that, and then we're bumping it
Moving
up by 2% for every 5 bonus points.
Yeah.
I mean, we could bump it up by 1% and make it 30% instead of 40.
I just wanted to get the thing.
No, there was definitely some methodology about trying to make sure that the hit, shall we say, to the developer, the financial hit to the developer, for this was roughly equivalent to this.
So the 40% is the 20% absolute requirement plus another 20%.
This 40%?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this includes the base 20%
okay.
requirement. It wouldn't be 60%. No, you wouldn't add the 20% to this. This includes the
Okay.
20% base requirement.
Okay.
In our
And they
Okay.
have to, the first bonus points always have to come out of this section? They can't?
Well, that's staff's proposal. They don't have to. I mean, you could decide to craft it some different way. I mean, you could switch it and say your first 50 points have to come from providing community benefits, and then if you need more than 50, you have to provide additional affordable units. Or you could say all the bonus points have to come from affordable units. Or, or I'm sure there's other permutations too. Yes.
During our joint session, I believe the topic came up regarding, or at least was in the packet, about voluntary inclusionary zoning for ownership, and you could have a certain percentage of units must be ownership or owner occupied for a density bonus. Is this something that has been looked into further?
No, frankly. I mean, it's evolved into what we're showing you here today. The problem about the ownership was that's kind of a tough nut to crack. I mean, one option would be to say it has to be all projects have to be condos, period. Then you don't get any rental, and you don't get the low and the very low income. If you say, well, projects can be ownership or not, as the developer wishes, well, that's where we are now.
Or what if the bonus points are either from affordability or from ownership?
Yeah, but not additional affordability levels. My sense.
No, I'm saying like maybe
Either or.
or some. I mean,
So you wouldn't require a condo map, but you'd say that if they did record a condo map, and
not actually saying condo map. I mean, what we were talking about was actually owner occupied units.
Well, yeah, that starts with a condo map.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, not just requiring that any development do a condo map, and then even if they're just going to be rental, I'm saying your bonus points could either come from affordability, or they could come from ownership.
It would seem to me that's going back. Let's go back to this.
I like this idea initially, but then as I'm sort of playing it out, I think what we could run into is then a market cycle where condominiums become really popular again, and we end up with a lot of condominium projects that just automatically get bonuses. Yeah,
Well,
right.
and it seems to me that if you say you only get bonus points if you provide an ownership project that at least half the people live in their units,
How do you
you've got to
enforce that?
record a condo map for that, and I believe, well, you'd have to have a homeowners association. The developer, I mean, I suppose the developer could retain ownership of half the units and operate that as rental, so you have a half rental, half ownership project, but that would be kind of an odd situation. I don't think you would have that typically. Basically, what you have is a condo project with an HOA where, no more than half the owners would be allowed to rent their units out.
Well, the condo,
Which is kind of what we were proposing.
that Marina condo has less than 50% of the units belonging to individuals, I believe.
The Marina condo? Which
Yeah,
one's that?
the Emery Cove,
Oh, okay.
because it went into bankruptcy and the guy that bought it stopped selling them.
Right. Well, I mean, sure, that can happen.
Well, and Charlie, if I can interject, I think during the joint session, in reading the staff report or the other reports, I can't remember, it stated that ownership does not always give us what we're looking for.
No.
Just having ownership doesn't always get us people
Giving
involved.
condominiums.
Yeah,
Giving condominiums doesn't necessarily
and then
mean
the other
ownership.
problem was
yeah.
is families that we're trying to attract to with children really can't qualify for those things. So it was kind of discussed at that meeting and kind of realized that if we do this, we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot, which is what we're trying to do overall is attract families with children to go to our schools. And they won't be able to afford to live here because they can't qualify for the housing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if there's some nuanced solution that provides different options. Because I hear what you're saying, but I think there is also benefit to ownership housing, which we're just not seeing happening.
So are you suggesting that ownership that meets certain criteria should be eligible for bonus points and rental projects would then not be eligible for bonus points?
No.
So rental projects still would be eligible for
Yeah,
bonus points.
I'm not solving the problem. I'm just throwing some thoughts out.
We're trying to, we're really trying to solve a bunch of different problems here.
Yeah.
But the affordable housing is a big part of what we're trying to solve. And so we're just, and as you know, right now for rental projects, we cannot require in-project affordable units. Just if a project it meets the density requirements without requiring any bonus, we can collect our fee, but that's all we can do. Only if they require some kind of discretionary concession from the city, such as a density bonus, only then can we require them to have the in-project affordable units. So and it only seems fair that the more bonus you get, the more affordability you have to provide. So that's kind of where we're coming from here. If I could just wrap up here in the last couple of slides. The question about the ARENA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, and whether or not this is going to jeopardize our housing element has come up. The short answer is no, it won't. It's fine. So don't worry about it. But just to kind of quickly walk you through the analysis. In the housing element, there is a table similar to this. This column over here is not in that table, but this column sort of is. Our regional housing needs allocation number, ARENA number for 2014 to 2022 is 1,498, almost 1,500 units. So what the housing element does is it looks at projects that are already in the pipeline, already in the development pipeline. They're either under construction or they're proposed, or they're like the 66 units that you just approved tonight. They're somewhere in our pipeline. They're on our radar. We know about them. That number is 1,837. So that's already above our ARENA. Then the housing element also looks at existing vacant and underutilized sites that could potentially be used for housing. There's a map in the housing element that shows where those sites are, and there's a table that says what the current zoning of them is with regard to the density. And that density is the base density. It's not a bonus density. So they looked at the base density of all of those sites, and they assumed 75% of that base density, not 100% of it, just 75% of it. So if it's 100 units per acre is the base density, and it's a 1 acre site, they assumed 75 units on that site. No bonus and not even up to the full base. So that equaled 3,468 additional units on top of the 1,837 already in the pipeline. So that's a total of 5,300, a little over 5,300 unit potential in the city right now. And if you subtract our RENA number from that number, you see we have a surplus of 3,800 units. So we got plenty of excess capacity to meet our RENA. Now, that's currently. We made some adjustments. The RENA is still the same, of course. We adjusted the planned and approved projects table because when the housing element was prepared, they were using the numbers that they had then. Since that time, the numbers have changed a little bit for the projects in the pipeline, so we updated those numbers. So now it's 1,906 units in the pipeline. Dropping the base level, as we are suggesting, we went through every single site in the housing element and looked at what the base level is now and what it would become, and calculated how many units 75% of that new base level would support, and we got 2,253. That's a big drop from 3,468, but it's still plenty. So these two numbers now add up to 4,159, and if you subtract our RENA from that, you get 2,661. So we don't have as big a surplus as we had before, but it's still a huge surplus. We have enough capacity to produce about 245% or 275% of our RENA, almost 3 times our RENA we have the capacity for, even with the lowered base numbers. So we don't believe there is a problem with our RENA or our housing element. So now we come to, after all this discussion, here are the questions that we would like you to answer, as well as whatever other answers you want to give us. Is our summary of the direction we got at the May 2nd joint meeting accurate? Does the commission concur in our proposals for unit mix, unit size, design guidelines, exceptions, and ownership housing? Should the rental bonus be a 2-tier system, such as 50 points for affordable units and the additional points above that for community benefits, or alternatively a 1-tier system where all the points have to be earned for affordable units, or some other variation? Should the non-residential bonus point system similarly be a 2-tier system, where the first 50 points are for the additional affordable housing fees and additional points for community benefits, or alternatively, it could be what it is today, which is a 1-tier system where all the points come from community benefits? Do you concur in our abbreviated list of community benefits for earning the development bonuses? And are there any other issues that we haven't covered that you think we should cover? And if so, how should we cover them? So that's my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions you may have. Otherwise, you might want to hear from the public.
Well, I guess the only issue I have with this is there's no carrots. Everything is a stick here. And
well, the theory is that the bonus is the carrot.
Yeah.
You get to build a bigger building.
oh, okay. It's less of a carrot than it used to be.
Well, I mean,
we're making it more of a carrot by reducing the base levels.
yeah, that's right.
No, that's a bigger stick.
Well, yeah. I mean, no developer is going to do it if it doesn't pencil.
Right.
So if they can't get more of a profit by building a bigger building in exchange for the affordability that we're asking for, then they're not going to do it. I guess we'll find out.
Since we've even lowered the density automatically, they may not do anything at all.
Maybe. We'll see. Any other
So
questions?
there's no incentive that's been put in place, particularly for ownership housing. If we want that, we have to incentivize people to build it, I think.
Well, we're certainly open to whatever incentives you might think are appropriate. I would suggest before you get into to deliberating on this that you hear from the public first. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any clarifying questions you may have.
I have one. I don't see, or maybe I'm not reading it in these questions. Where is the changing of dropping the minimums? I don't see that as part of a question here.
It's
So we're dropping the baseline?
embedded in question 1.
Okay. But what I'd like to have is a question saying, do you agree that we should drop the baseline?
Here's what.
That's also question 6. Any other issues, concerns?
Here's what we had.
Well, I'd like to address that specifically.
Here's what we had from the May 2nd meeting. Should the base levels be lowered? The answer was yes. If you recall, it was Councilmember Donahue who was speaking at this point. He said yes, and nobody else said anything.
Well, this is the problem with that meeting. At that point in the meeting, we got very rushed. I had a whole statement to make at the end of that meeting
Okay.
and never got to make it.
Well,
so I
then-
think these answers are rushed, and I'm glad that they were brought back to us. So I'd like to flush that question out a lot more than we are here.
Yeah, so I
Oh,
have a-
then that's, like I say, that's question 1, I would say. I mean,
Well,
you
I
can-
think staff's summary is correct, but I don't think the
Okay.
way we approach
all right,
those
all right,
answers
then
are
Commissioner
really good.
Donaldson is correct. It's question 6.
Okay, well, that is a discussion I'd like to have specifically.
Well, here's a question. If we were to endorse all of all of these staff recommendations here that are before us tonight, when would that reduction in bonuses, like when would that come back to us? Because for me, those numbers are really key.
You mean the abbreviated bonus point system?
No. I mean the reduction in the base levels and
Oh,
like where you set the base level. I think is key to this whole discussion.
Exactly. And we brushed on it during the joint meeting, but we never got into the meat of the subject. We never bit into the bone. We just kind of brushed over it.
okay. That was in the PowerPoint for the joint meeting. If I can try to put that up here.
Well, I think I can't move forward with any of this without setting that baseline as this is what we're going to talk about. Right now, with what was discussed, I can't agree with that until we get into it a lot more seriously.
This is just a study session.
Right.
Well, let me tell you, I mean, the answer to your question is, I'll give you our tentative schedule. Our tentative schedule is to bring this to the City Council for a study session on July 21st. Then to bring it back to the commission after having heard from you tonight and from hearing from them at that point, to then put together an actual proposal for an ordinance. And there would be a public hearing on that at your August meeting. And then that would be considered by the City Council on September 15th. And final passage would be on October 6th. And that would then take effect on November 6th.
Okay, so my concern right now is we're blessing what we talked about at the joint meeting as the baselines right now because we don't have it here to discuss before us and it's not going to come back to us until it's gone to
I can
council.
put it up here. I can dig it up and put it up. Thank you, Gail.
Well, I mean, I think that's
part of it.
again, it's 10 o'clock at night, and I think that is a conversation that could take an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
This is what happened at the joint meeting is we reached 4 o'clock and Councilmember Donahue kind of ran the show at that point because we were so late in time. And I literally had a whole page of comments to make that I never got to make.
About this?
Yeah, I made a lot of comments about it at the meeting.
Yeah,
and
we tried to.
I didn't- without, yeah.
Well, I
I
mean,
think these are too low. To start off with, I think if we drag everything down to the baseline right off the bat, I think it's too low. I can't get into it because I haven't seen it, beyond to our joint session to really discuss it and think about it. But at first blush, I think it's too low.
So why don't let's I think kind of bring this back to so we can open up the public
Yeah, I
comments
think
and
that's
then we can
important.
get back
Yeah,
on
I
to
think
the
that's important.
discussion.
so just let me say here, this is what we're suggesting. The base levels will be about 50% of the bonus level. So if the base is 50 units per acre, the bonus would be 100 units per acre.
And it used to be, what, 25%?
Well, it's not an exact percent. I mean, it was just, somewhat about 2/3 or so.
This is the problem.
Well, you don't, this is not necessarily an integral part of all of this. The only thought behind dropping the base level was to capture more projects in the bonus system. But the rest of these proposals don't hinge on that.
Right.
You can leave the base level where it is if you want, and we'd still have our proposal for requiring affordable
But therein lies the
units.
problem. We're not having that conversation of what to make those base levels at. We're assuming what we saw in the draft is what we want to go
we are having that conversation. That's what we're doing tonight. That's the point of this study session.
Okay, so we're going to get to it.
We can if you want to.
Yeah.
What's that?
After
you-
public comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay, great, thanks. All right, so at this time we'll open the public comment, so if anyone would like to speak, please come forward.
Filled out one.
So,
Good evening, and it is evening, isn't it? My name is Lisa Vorderbrugget, and I represent the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area. And I thank you for allowing us to come here tonight and offer some input into your proposed new density program. I would say that, you know, it's good to have stretch goals. We all need to have stretch goals. But I think perhaps this proposal stretches so far that the very housing that you desire to have would be disincentivized and jeopardized by many of the provisions that are contained in this proposal. I spoke with some of our members, some of whom have projects here in Emeryville, and for example, they say that requiring a 60% of the units to be 2 or 3 bedroom in order to qualify for the bonus points that they need will simply be financially infeasible. They'll just walk away from those projects. They'll wait for a better time, perhaps a new makeup of the Planning Commission, a new makeup of the City Council, or when the economy is more favorable to do that. So we would really encourage the Planning Commission and the city to look at some more reasonable numbers that factor reality in terms of what it costs to build a project, what it costs to put it online. And remember that affordable housing, in truth, is subsidized housing. And the subsidization comes from the prices that we all pay for rent and for the price of housing. And as the Legislative Analyst's Office recently noted, and I provided you with a handout, allowing increased densities plays a crucial role in meeting the housing needs of our region. The report notes that it's too often the developers in places like the Bay Area are financially precluded from responding to high land prices, limited available land, and strong demand through these increased densities. A lack of housing drives up home prices and rents, as I've said. It hurts the economy, forces a lot of families to live elsewhere other than Emeryville, as you have all been experiencing here. It's really crucial that Emeryville maintain a feasible path to achieving the densities needed by projects like Sherwin-Williams and some of the others in your pipeline. Otherwise, as Mr. Cardoza said, there's a whole lot of sticks, and the carrot is a little rotten, I think. So I thank you for the time, the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Angelo King, Emeryville resident. I too was at Sacramento the day they were judging redevelopment, and I was screaming at them, you guys have no idea what you're doing, because I knew exactly what was happening that day, and that was the inability to really subsidize affordable housing. And so I have this on both hands here. I understand what it needs to take, and I always would tell people, as I'd see people enraged about it, to have a more comprehensive conversation, because affordable housing is not free. The wages are not going down, materials not going down, and yet we need this housing. If you did the 2,661 houses, and you did 30%, 15 at 2s and 15 at 3s, you know, you still end up with 800 units of 2s and 3s and families that would go to Anna Yates, that would go to Emeryville Secondary, which my cousin is graduating from. So this is important. This is really important that we don't stop creating housing and not do things that are outside, trying to fix things that from a policy standpoint, we all know it's broken in terms of financing affordable housing, and we have to think about different ways we're going to do that. And I think that going about it this way, and also I think that having this issue leave the Planning Commission before you guys are actually settled to go to the elected officials, I think that's backwards. I think that this is the body that's supposed to make a decision along with your staff about sending something credible to the city policymakers once you got it fully baked, not before.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rod Henme again. As an architect who has devoted his career to affordable housing, I passionately support your goal to provide more family-friendly housing. However, I'm here today because I believe some of the regulations that you're considering will work against the goal to increase family housing, and here's why. I surveyed 9 new apartment complexes in Emeryville, and I have an attachment to give to you. The average 3-bedroom apartment costs $3,700. Using a standard proportion of rent to income of 1 to 3, a family needs to be making around $133,000 to afford this rent. Families making this level of income have many choices for their homes. For wealthier families, the critical issues are quality of the schools, safety, and single-family housing stock. I work on affordable housing projects, which are usually defined as serving families making 50 to 60% of the AMI. For Emeryville, this amount is $47,000 to $56,000, solid working-class families. I'm sure we can all agree that a family of 4 making around $50,000 cannot afford a 3-bedroom rent of $3,700 a month. The only way this working-class family can rent an apartment in Emeryville is to be able to qualify for one of the few affordable housing complexes. For working-class families, the number one issue is affordability. And as Charles mentioned, design guidelines don't address affordability. What is the likely result of trying to legislate family apartments? 1, increasing the average cost of the units and thereby raising rents. For example, requiring a 2- and 3-bedroom apartment minimum ratio will raise the cost per unit of the complex, decrease the number of units, and raise average rents. It will also not necessarily result in families moving in. In fact, anecdotal evidence indicates that students or young professionals, not families, are moving into 3-bedroom units in Emeryville because of the cost. Here are my suggestions. Minimize new compulsory design recommendations or standards, and particularly, I do not think it's a good idea to legislate this unit mix because of unintended consequences. 2, increase the affordable housing contribution per unit of market rate housing. 3, develop other sources of funding for affordable housing. And 4, work on the issues that will attract wealthier families, such as schools, safety, better single-family housing stock. If you do decide to require a unit mix standard, which sounds like the direction you're going in, I suggest keep this percentage low and exempt senior housing and special needs housing, such as transitional housing for foster use, both of which are almost always all 1-bedroom units. I recently spoke about these issues with Carol Galante, a friend and long-term client who recently stepped down as the Assistant Secretary of HUD, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. I described in general terms the city's approach to regulate family-friendly housing, and she agreed with me that this will not likely be successful in creating family housing in Emeryville. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to try to set up a meeting with her to talk about these issues. Thank you for listening, and here's the handout that indicates the apartment rentals.
Thank you. All right.
Good evening, Commissioners. Alex Waterbury with Lennar and the Sherwin-Williams project. I have a lot I'd like to comment overall about everything that's been discussed tonight. I know we don't have limited time, perhaps maybe a cup of coffee individually or as a group, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts, our thoughts on the affordability component, which, as Charlie said, kind of makes up the core of the proposal here tonight. Again, a lot to comment on. Try to break it down into 3 things. When we talk about the 60% effectively required for us to hit the 20% on-site inclusionary, which is something that we want to achieve, this is something that we effectively have to do. Commissioner Cardozo, as you said, it really is a stick to us because we've been downzoned. So just to get back to where we were, we need to do this, and we want to provide inclusionary as much as we can. But I can tell you right now, looking at the design guidelines and this mix, it is financially infeasible to do so at 60% 2s and 3s. And whether it's us or other projects, you're sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater at that point, because you get 100% of nothing when you're really trying to provide for housing for families and ownership housing, which leads to my second point. The 40% moderate scale, I know there's a method to it. There is a reason why we don't see a lot of for sale housing right now in Emeryville, because not a lot of cities have a 20% moderate requirement. And we've talked to Alan Mark, who's owns a unit, a leading for sale advisor in the Bay Area, and he said the same thing. We've talked about going to 40%, which we would need to do to maximize the number of units here, and it is infeasible, and it's not a good idea to try to put that many homeowners at that income scale within a project. It won't happen. So that's another policy issue I think we should talk more about. And then I think lastly, this is something that I think we all share. And as an example for us, if we were to provide 19% of our total project count, unit count, as affordable at the 60% level or 50 or 40, whatever we agreed to, but not 20, we couldn't even begin to start talking about the other bonus points for the community benefits the way it's proposed right now. So we'd like to talk about some mixing and matching and ways to get all these other benefits that could come, not just the affordable. So again, I'd like to talk with you at any other time if we can. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Kevin Maw with Lennar, representing the Sherman-Williams project as well. And just to touch on two aspects that Alex didn't get to touch on earlier, when you guys talked about the second tranche of the bonus point system, one recommendation that we'd like you guys to consider is including the significant structures bonus that was previously included in there. As I think many of you guys are aware, there's a high cost to preserving these historical buildings, similar to the one that we have in our Sherman-Williams project. And if that bonus system is not there, that carrot is not there, I think it's going to be very difficult for us and other developers working in other parts of the city on other projects to make that trade-off of, do you want to preserve that structure, or do you need to deploy those dollars to pursue other bonus points, because you need those bonus points now because everything's been downzoned. So that was just one item that we'd like you guys to consider. And then secondarily, on the affordability mix that Charlie had talked about for rental, he had prescriptive kind of percentages of low, moderate, and very low. One thing that we just like to have for discussion is that when we talk to affordable housing developers, they actually would propose a deeper level of affordability than some of the levels that have been included there. So if there's the ability to have that flexibility when looking at those various levels to not be so prescriptive, but have a equal or better than affordability level at those various levels, I think that would be a favorable process as we go through this system. So those are just the two comments that we had. Thank you.
Good evening, Bruce Dorfman. As someone that's developed both rental and for sale product in Emeryville over the past 15 years, I suppose I have a perspective about this. And looking at the proposed structure of the bonuses, specifically as they relate to the affordable housing and the family-friendly or the larger units, I would say that it's going to push you to prospectively the unintended consequence of people aren't going to, or developers aren't going to be looking at the minimum or looking at achieving the bonuses because of the costs of doing so, but actually taking it a step further, they're not even going to hit the minimum levels that you're reducing the FARs or densities to, because the economics aren't there. The economics would be going to the other extreme. So if you want to reduce overall density well below the minimums that you're setting up, you have the potential for doing that by virtue of the fact it's going to be much more economical to be at one extreme, which is very low density, than to be at a moderate density. So it's kind of, we either want to be at high density or you want to be at low density. And being in the middle point is kind of the product that doesn't make sense. The second comment I was going to make related to the May 2nd proposal or discussion related to the reductions in the FAR and density that were discussed. And they were disproportionate relative to the various thresholds, and I think that they should be proportionate. So if you're looking at the higher density areas versus the moderate and the lower density areas, they should all be reduced accordingly. One shouldn't be reduced more than the others, and that's what I saw when I was reviewing that. So I'd like to put that out there for your consideration. Thank you.
Any other speakers? All right, with that, we'll close the public comment, and we will bring this back for deliberation.
I'm going to try to see if I can get this PowerPoint on there. I'm having a hard time with this thumb drive, but
Okay. Want to start, or you want to go last?
Which do you prefer?
He's going to make a presentation here, I think.
I'm going to actually want Charlie to put something on the overhead.
yeah, hang on a sec.
Foreclosed units in your building, are they bought by investors?
Both, I think.
So you have a high percentage of rentals then?
We do. I don't know what the percentage
Because you had a lot of
Okay.
While Charlie's doing this, if you'd like,
higher percentages, yeah.
Chair Moss, I could go ahead and start. I'm going to
It was ahead of you, but
read a statement just so I can get everything out that I need to get out. But I just first of all want to just start by saying I feel really like this is a study session that can't be completed once again as our joint meeting was. I believe we've opened a can of worms and we just can't get to it within the time frame that we have unless we want to extend the meeting. I just also want to remind all of us that the one thing, and when I had a meeting with the principal of Gensler Architecture that just opened an office in Oakland, and they said Emeryville's main problem is, number one, we're not urban enough. We have too many surface parking lots to be a true city currently. And number two, we don't have a BART station. And right now, with the availability of development sites in Oakland, Oakland has now become a big contender and a big player. And that's why Gensler, which is one of the largest architectural firms in the world, has opened an office there. So those are just two things I think we as a city need to contemplate. That many, many years ago, Emeryville was the hotspot and the place to be. And because as things do in life, our position in the area has changed a little. It's not gotten bad, but we just don't have the site that we used to have, and primarily because public transit is becoming more important and BART stations are very key. So with that, if I can have Charlie put this on the overhead, it will be referred to in the comment. I understand reading is a little bit impersonal, but I really want to try to get these things out. So it's my understanding on this subject that what we're trying to do overall is to attract more families with children to Emeryville. And the good news is that according to our own data, which is shown on this chart, this was in our staff report of our April 23rd meeting. In the last 8 years, Emeryville's household with children having grown by 4.3%. So it would appear that what we're doing is working. Recent data shows that our current regulations and programs are giving us a higher number of family-friendly housing types. And I understand to a limited degree that we can and should do more. But the real hurdle for families now is affordability, and thus I believe at this point our prime objective should be making housing affordable, not making housing more costly to build. Thus, as I stated in our April 23rd Commission meeting, and I'll state it again, my concern is that our Christmas list to Santa Claus is beginning to exceed the size of his sleigh. And by saying that, I mean I'm seeing each of these items that we're considering as adding tens of thousands of dollars to the cost of building each unit, which in turn makes each unit more expensive, not affordable. These opinions are supported by a recent report, which we were just shown again tonight, by the California Legislative Office that clearly states builder costs, including government fees, building codes, and development fees, contribute to making housing more expensive, particularly in California. It's also stated that fees in California are higher than anywhere else in the country. As proposed, if passed, I count the following 6 requirements for each new building project in Emeryville. That 50% of all units in every project has to be 2% or more bedrooms. Each unit of 2 or more bedrooms must conform to family-friendly design guidelines, so it's saying 50% of a project must conform to these more expensive design programs. Larger complexes should be broken into smaller communities around open spaces, driving up the cost for the whole project. All projects must pay $20,000 per door towards an affordable housing fund. And just by tonight's prior approval of the marketplace, those 66 units equal over $3.2 million. Or no, 1.2, I'm sorry.
1.32.
1.32. So it's equal to well over $1 million just in that fee alone. And then along with that, they have to pay our parks fee and our transit fee. We are requiring the creation of affordable for sale units as the first requirement to fulfill before any bonus points can even be earned. So we're already pushing up the cost even before they can look at any more density bonus points. And we'll be lowering the threshold that will trigger the requirement for this bonus point system. So in short, we're basically making the need to use bonus points pretty much required, but making the bonus point system more difficult to use by reducing the items that we would earn the bonus points and making the benefits of a requirement, making this a benefit requirement before a project can even begin. So I'm just seeing layer upon layer upon layer of cost being added to this. And it seems like what we have done, the track record shows that we are being successful. So what I'm proposing is that we take some more time, and I know that council is the biggest push behind this. They really want something put on the books and stuff, but I think, as you do anything in haste, you make a lot of mistakes. I think we need to look at 5 to 7 key components. Is it family-friendly housing? Is it 3-bedroom units? Is it making the affordability component the key thing before we do bonuses? Find 5 or 7 things that we really all feel these are really key. These we could add to what we're already doing to make improvements. But I think the list we're creating is way too big, and I think it's going to be complicated, and it's going to backfire because people are just going to sit on empty lots until things change.
Yeah, nothing will happen.
That's pretty much all I have to say for right now.
I mean, the only place that will go ahead will be the public market.
That's correct.
I do worry also that it is going to tie up everything. It's like we want all these things, and yet I don't know how to make it work.
Could I just make one comment? I would note that before recent court decision invalidated inclusionary zoning, we had a requirement for rental housing that it have 9% moderate and 6% very low, I believe it was, in each project. That was a much steeper requirement than what we have now. Our $20,000 per unit or 6.9% low income, which is the alternative that they have now, is not as costly to developers as our previous inclusionary zoning requirement was, under which we produced a lot of below market rate units. And I never heard any real complaints from developers that it cost too much.
And I appreciate that clarification. The point I'm making is that, along with all the other things that we're doing, is causing, and what
family friendly and the 2 or more
my concern is that right now we're supposed to make a recommendation to council, which then they're going to talk about and vote on before summer. And I don't believe we've fleshed out all the details that we want to do.
Oh, they're not going to vote before summer.
Well, they're going to, are we, is so.
They'll come back to us in August.
And at that point, what will we get to be able to do with it? Totally change it if we feel they need to?
You're making a recommendation to the city council, whatever you deem the appropriate recommendation. And that recommendation will be informed by what you say tonight and what the council says at their study session.
Do you have a mix of things?
No, I don't, because I feel we need to take the time to talk about that. I think we need to take every one of these elements, this one on the screen being the first one, talk about it, come to an agreement, this is what I feel we need to do. Then we need to go to the family component. Then we need to go to the bonus program. And I know tonight we don't have that much time, but I feel like we haven't fleshed out all these details in each one of these bonus points or one of these incentives enough to make a recommendation to council, at least not for myself.
Why don't we get started on it?
Yeah. Can we go through these now?
Yeah, let's try.
Yeah.
Up to the chair.
Yeah. No, I hope that's what we will do. I mean, So yeah, if you're, I appreciate your comments. If you, I think as we move along, I mean, if you want to address the questions as best you can, either that or I think then we'll move along.
So would you like to look at the threshold levels that we had from the May 2nd meeting? So
or could you
here
put
they
the questions up and maybe we could just go through and sort of...
I'd like to see, I'd like to get some more of that.
Well, there was a request to see these charts.
Oh, okay.
I can go back to the questions, but I just wanted to go through these.
Yeah, leave that handy so we can get back to it, but I think for our discussion we should have the questions up.
I will for sure, but I just want to briefly review this. So this is FAR. The one right here that has 1.0 no bonus, that's just for the Doyle Hollis North area. That's kind of a unique district. This is the eastern residential neighborhoods that currently are 0.5 no bonus. We're suggesting adding the 1.0. So the 0.5 is half of 1.0. Let's see, if you go over to this side, it's currently 4.0 to 6.0. We were suggesting dropping it to 3.0. So again, that's half of the maximum of 6. This one currently is 3.0 to 4.0, so it would drop to 2, which is half of the maximum of 4. This one is currently 2.0 to 3.0. We drop it to 1.5 to 3.0, so that's half of the maximum of 3. This one, we didn't quite do that because it's currently 1.6. We could drop the base to 0, and the base is 1.2. We could drop the base to 0.8, but then it would be lower than this one over here, which kind of looked a little bit out of whack, so we just dropped it to 1.0. But if we want to make it half, it could be 0.8. So the cross-hatching, again, is the area that is currently base that would become bonus. For height, let's see. We didn't propose changing the 30 to 55. The 55 to 75, we're suggesting to make 40 to 75. We could make it exactly half, which would be 37.5 to 75, which just seems like sort of an odd number. The 75 to 100, we're suggesting make it 50 to 100, again, half. This one is a bit of an anomaly. This actually, there should be a little jaggedy line here to indicate no limit, because this just goes up forever. This is the 100 plus. So right now, the base is 100, and the maximum is over 100. So we're suggesting make the base be 75. So then you have this little area between 75 and 100 that would require increments of bonus points. Currently, the way it is if you want to go over 100 feet, you got to get 100 points. It's all or nothing. If you go to 99 feet, you need 0 points. Or 100 feet, you need 0 points. If you go to 101 feet now, you need 100 points. So what we're suggesting, drop the base to 75. So between 75 and 100, you could get that in increments from 0 to 100 points. And then above that, it's 100 points. And then this is residential density. So the 20 to 35, we're not suggesting that change. The 50 to 60, we are suggesting drop to 35 to 60. That's a little more than half. The base is a little more than half the maximum, but that was just to match the maximum of the other zone over here. But we could certainly drop it so that it's 30 to 60 to make it exactly half. The 85 to 100 currently, we're suggesting be 50 to 100. The 100 to 135 currently, we're suggesting to drop to just slightly more than half of 135, which is 65 as opposed to 62.5. And then the 115 to 170, we're suggesting make it 80 to 170. We could make it, I guess, 85 to 170 would be half. So basically the idea was to make them all half of the maximum. If you look at the current bonus increments, which are the lighter areas up here, they're not exactly proportional. I mean, this one is bigger than this one, and then they kind of get progressively bigger, so I'm not sure exactly what the proportion is now. So that's what we were proposing. Basically, drop it to roughly half of the maximum. Now, if you want to suggest it should be 2/3 of the maximum or 3/4 of the maximum or some other percentage of the maximum, we could do that, or just leave them the way they are. So, but that's what they are. And let me get this back up here. Okay. Do you want to walk through all these questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can, as we go through our discussion, I think we can just try to address the questions. you want to?
Yeah, thanks. Can you come back to me? Punk?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I'll start.
Buzz, you want to go?
Yeah, as I said before, I believe in the carrot rather than the stick. I think we should leave the base approval where it is and not cut it back, and perhaps add higher density bonuses on top to get more affordable units, family-friendly units, whatever, but not cut out what they can do now. That's my general feeling about it.
The only comment I would like to make on that is if we tried to steer away from increasing the existing bonus level because that would imply a larger development potential in the city, which could mean that further environmental review might be needed in order to do this. We're planning on relying on the general plan EIR, but if the development potential of the city exceeds what was assumed in the general plan EIR, then we might have to do further environmental review on it.
You want to go?
Up to you. You want me to go? I've got a lot to say, but I mean, after our joint session, a couple council members came to me and said, so, this is going to be a lot of work. Are you guys up for this? Because we're going to be basically relying on you guys to come up with some guidelines and guidance for us. But we know what we know the task that's being given to us. And it's going to, this is the direction that we're going to be moving. So it's up to us to either give constructive guidance with regard to this, or just kind of, flail and not come up with anything, and then they're going to end up making their decisions without us. And so I want to provide as much guidance as possible to them. And so I'm just going to try to hit these different points. All the projects that we've seen before us, I think the Sherman-Williams project's the only one that I know of that's really relying on bonuses, and a lot of the others are actually developing, not only not relying on bonuses, but they're developing lower density, lower height projects than they are entitled to. And so the idea that we're going to be, most of these projects would already be going through regardless, one way or the other. So we're trying to incentivize affordable housing and family-friendly housing, but I don't think we're dramatically reducing the appeal of Emeryville when it comes to development. I keep seeing these projects come up, and it's like, there's a PUD, it's approved for 100 feet, but they're going to do 75 feet, or it's entitled to be 5 stories, they're going to go with 3. So we're already seeing that. So I think we need to try to work this out. I think the devil's going to be all in the details. As far as the floor area ratio goes, is it dropping it down so it's 50% of the bonus level? I'm not certain. 50, 75. We're trying to incentivize affordable housing and family-friendly housing, but I think it would be valuable to have some kind of study done to sort of see where is there that sweet spot where it's actually going to happen, or is, if we go to 50, and are we just pretty much never going to get any, are we never going to get any affordable housing, or what's going to happen? So a little bit of, some studies would be valuable. And with regard to the heights and the is it 50% there? I think that at least one comment that I have, and that always bothers me, is when heights are given and they're not really accounting for construction. So when you say like a height of 40 feet, a height of 40 feet is generally not going to be a 4-story building. It's often going to you're going to end up in this weird situation where you're end up doing 3-story buildings when you're really intending to do a 4-story building, especially when a lot of times there'll be like a ground floor minimum height, or if you're trying to get parking in, you end up with like a 12-foot ground floor. You don't want to be incentivizing people to do 8-foot ceilings on upper floors or anything along those lines. So keeping in mind the heights and actually being practical about it. Should a minimum percentage of 2+, 3+ units be required in multifamily? I still feel that it should be, but I don't necessarily feel that if someone goes over that percentage and is building more than 50% 2s and 3s, that those additional 2s and 3s need to be family friendly. I think that we need to provide flexibility and allow for creative alternative approaches to housing, as well as trying to create affordable and family friendly housing. Let's see here. Well, with regard to the floor area ratio, I still have issues with the bumping the, or creating a 1 bonus with a bonus floor area ratio for the RM zone. I think you're going to end up with 3,000 square foot homes and 3,000 square foot lots, 4,000 square foot homes and 4,000 square foot lots. That's great maybe it'll be 2 homes, but it's just those zones. If you drive around those zones, walk around those zones, I abut, one of those zones, it's a bunch of little, cottages and craftsmen, and then you see the occasional monster home that is, at that one floor area ratio, and they don't fit into those areas. They they completely put all the other houses adjacent to them in shadows. So I don't think we should be going up to the 1 in the RM zones for the floor area ratio, and if that means lowering the density because the density isn't in balance with the floor area ratio, then I think maybe that's the case. Let's see here. I do agree with most of the reduction or deletions of bonus options. I think it's a good list that we whittled down to. I appreciate the comment regarding the significant structures. Honestly, I went through the bonus point system at one point and just kind of looked at them and thought which ones could just be made, could be indoctrinated in some other manner, and it seemed to me like sustainable design, alternative energy. I thought alternative energy could. I guess I see the point about the zero net energy, but the water efficiency, I mean, all of these could just become part of our code. The energy efficiency, the transportation demand management could be tied to parking reductions. The family friendly is going to be a requirement. Neighborhood center could be required. Public art we could require if we wanted to. Public parking, I don't know if we need more public parking. And then the bike stations, I guess I had a question as to whether or not that actually ever happens, but I guess it does on occasions. Significant structures, I'd like to see an increase in the number of protected structures in the city, and maybe that would be the solution to getting rid of the bonuses for significant structures. Electric vehicles, mechanical equipment concealing, these to me seem like things that could easily be required. Universal design could be required as a percentage. So I think overall it's a good list as far as the deletions, but I would like to see us then figure out how to keep the incentives and the requirements that used to be achieved through bonuses. So it's like how do we codify those now that we're removing those as bonuses. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Chair Moss, could I just respond to a couple of those?
Sure.
Excuse me. On the FAR in the residential neighborhood, I just want to point out that would be discretionary, and it would have to be based on findings most of these projects presumably would come before the Planning Commission for approval. And to approve anything over an FAR of 0.5, you'd have to be satisfied that it was, I mean, one of the key findings is that it's compatible with the neighborhood, that it fits in, that it complies with our design guidelines and all those other kinds of things. So hopefully you won't be approving big boxes that overshadow their neighbors under this. I mean, obviously, if you don't want to add that, that's fine, but I just want to point out that if you did add it, it wouldn't just give people the right to just willy-nilly go out and maximize their building envelope.
Sure.
They have to come to you for approval. On the significant structures, we will, at some point in the hopefully not too distant future, be bringing you an ordinance to recommend to the City Council for a map and list of significant structures. We currently have a criteria for significant structures, and we have a working map of which ones we think they are. And based on those criteria, we've had a number of projects come before the Commission and Council that involved either demolition or reuse of significant structures that did have to make those findings. But part of our thinking is that you already have to get City Council approval to demolish a significant structure. So that's a pretty good incentive to keep it.
Yeah.
You know, even regardless of whether or not you get bonus points. So we think there's things in place for that. And with regard to the other things on the list, most of them are already requirements to a certain extent. And the question just is, you'd get bonus points if you go over that base requirement. So electric vehicle charging stations for residential projects, that's already a requirement. Public art, that's already a requirement. You know, a number of these things are already requirements. So if you're happy with the existing requirement, you don't need to give them bonus points for going over those requirements, or you could up the existing requirement if you wanted to. So those are just some observations on those things.
Charlie, I thought we did go through the significant structures in the city and
I think you
point in
did.
the
I think
past.
you
We looked
did
at a whole
quite a
bunch.
while ago. It's kind of been on the back burner for quite a while. We've had a few other things going on, but you never made a decision about it. I think it was, well, no, actually, let me take that back. I believe
Had a list.
I
I
think
believe
we
we
made a
brought it to you for a decision, and it was either you or the City Council, one of the two, basically kicked it back.
It was the council.
Okay, I guess it was the council. Okay, maybe you already did approve it. I guess you did. You're right. That was such a long time ago, I can't remember. But yeah, the council kicked it back and told us to go think about it some more. So we've been thinking about it ever since.
Well, I think Commissioner Gunkel's point of having some kind of mechanism to preserve these buildings would be the way to go. As you know, the significant structure, okay, saving a significant structure, but how about you have to?
Yeah.
Right? That's
Well,
And
that's basically what the ordinance
Yeah.
says.
Okay.
You have to unless the city council says you don't have to. And there are a number of different scenarios under which the council can approve demolition. You know, one is with a replacement structure, in which case there's all kinds of findings that the replacement structure has to be at least equal in design quality to the structure that's being replaced and all this other kind of stuff. There's some other things about if the site is contaminated or if it's just in the best interest of the public to demolish the building, whatever it may be. But there are a lot of protections built in. And it's for, you know, and the new list that we've come up with, the pared down list after the council directed us to, also includes a listing of what it is about each building that makes it significant, so that you know if, you know, maybe you can demolish the backside of it if that's not such a impressive piece, but you can't demolish this part of it over here and so forth. So it's pretty well thought out, I think.
I mean, I remember seeing the list or a map and asking why it was as limited as it was, and I got that. I heard that at the time there was pressure to keep it pared down, but I'm wondering if that's changing with the new council. And I think there's probably a lot of buildings in this city that could stand to be added to the list that aren't currently on it.
Well, you can obviously debate that when we bring it to you.
Yeah, good.
Well, I think that this is a really, really delicate balance and a very complex subject that we have here. And in terms of the questions that are up here, I think that most of the summary of the discussion is pretty accurate, but I think as Commissioner Keller said, a lot of the discussion was a little bit truncated because we had such limited amount of time. And I do know that I had myself said that I didn't really think that if you met the 2 and 2+ bedroom requirement, that the family-friendly guidelines would have to apply to all the other ones that are not required, because I do think that we need to have some flexibility. And I think I did also mention that there are living situations like senior housing and assisted living kind of situations that call for different kinds of unit designs, and I think we need to keep some of that flexibility and creativity. I do think that we should have a requirement for a certain number of a percentage of the 2 and 3 bedroom units. My fear is a little bit of what Commissioner Gunkel was expressing. Not so much, I'm not afraid that developers will stay away for the next few years, because the cycles go around, and if we have land here, somebody's going to come eventually and get us what we want. I'm more afraid that if we don't craft this correctly, that we're going to get everything built downsized, that we're going to have, instead of an opportunity site that may sit for a few years and then become a great thing, we'll end up with a mediocre half-sized thing that doesn't give us what we want. So that's the main worry that I have about this. I think the idea of possibly having some more financial study information that gives us a little bit better basis to understand those things would be good. Because of that concern I have about getting smaller things just because people can do it by right and don't have to meet the extra bonus requirements, I would tend to say that I think that the base levels should go down a little bit, just in order to it's about finding that balance. And I'm hearing different things from affordable housing advocates and from developers, and I think it's very complicated to get to where we're going. I think that the transition between rental units and ownership units, the condo conversion thing, is a really kind of a minefield area. I don't quite understand how it's going to work with, if somebody is selling part of the units, and how do you keep them from selling more of the units, or how do you go from 22% moderate affordability to a graduated, or back and forth between those things. I think that that's a really complicated thing that's going to have to be worked out. I think that I do think that the existing bonus system has a lot of stuff that should be taken out, and I agree with reducing the categories. I think that the categories that you have left are good, but I do also think that the flexible benefit is really important, because there are all kinds of community benefits that could be presented that we might want to consider that we haven't even thought of at this point. Other questions? I think that, the 2-tier system, looking at especially things like, if we have this system where you go up to 60% affordable units for 50-point bonus, then do you need to have 120% affordable units to get 100% bonus? We need to have some flexibility about how we're working those extra things.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know if you just spread that same number over 100 points instead of over 50 points, but then that means you basically don't have to do as much to get the bonus.
Wait, explain that again. I didn't quite get that.
If we're talking about tier, I think that a tiered system makes sense, because I don't think it should be entirely based on affordability and multi-bedroom units. I think we should have options for other kinds of benefits. But if you're saying that 40% affordable housing on a condo development is 50 points, then do you need, if someone says, well, I'm going to do 70% affordable, then how do you figure out those bonus point kind of situation? And if you need to have 60% two bedrooms to have 50 points, you can't really have 120% two bedrooms to get 100 points. So there's some tweaking that needs to go on there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this goes up in 1% increment for every 5 points. So it would just be another 10% to get to 100 points.
Okay.
So it'd be up to 70%. I get, I mean, what I was saying is, if we didn't have a two-tier system, if we just have a one-tier system, and over in this column, instead of it going to 50, it goes to 100, do these numbers all here, do they stay the same? Or do they double? Or, you know, how does that work? It does seem like 40% affordable units and 80% affordable, or whatever it would be, is a stretch.
Yeah.
So it would, but on the other hand, if you make this be 100 points and you leave these numbers the same, then basically you're getting twice as many points for the same benefit. But again, these numbers are just illustrative, so we can try to tweak them until we get them right.
I don't know what the ramifications of these tweaks are.
Somehow I think you have to do an economic analysis, and I don't have the expertise to do it, but you really have to work out what it costs to build a building, what return does the owner want to get on it, or nominally get on it, and how much extra can they do to make it still make sense. Mm-hmm. We don't have any handle on that at all.
Mm-hmm. And things like the height being tied to actual building
Cost, yeah.
cost, as well as physical reality of how things are made. So
it just, economic issue has to be studied, and otherwise nothing will happen.
Well, again, I'm not afraid that nothing is going to happen on our opportunity sites for a while, because eventually the housing, I mean, it's going to come together eventually. I'm more concerned about people saying, your bonus system is not affordable, we can't build it, so we're going to build something that's just below the limits, and you can't do it, you can't tell us what to do now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%.
That's the alternative,
And that's an unintended
which
consequence.
devalues the thing. The fees that come to the city, the tax base the city gets out of it shrinks down too.
Yeah, I'd rather do something. I'd rather have the unintended consequence be no development, which we could later on fix, than have the unintended consequence be bad development.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my point.
stand too.
So I'm done
Yeah.
for the moment.
Oh, well, I also stand in that. I am concerned that we're going to get sort of a watered down version of nothing, as opposed to, or a watered down version of something as opposed to nothing, or something we really want. So that with this 50% reduction in baseline, I also in the RM zone, I do not want to increase the FAR in height to 1%. I think that's a mistake. In terms of the bonus system being two-tier for residential and non-residential, again, I think that we have to do sort of the analysis of how that plays out in the different ways. It's a little bit beyond me at this point to visualize that. In terms of the bonuses being cut, that makes perfect sense to me, and that they should be encoded into our general plan, and as well as would be moving that off bonuses and more into what we require for our buildings. I think that's an important point, and I guess that's where I'm at. Yeah.
So if I can just, I guess I'll go through the questions real quick. So yeah, I think the summary from the meeting was fine. I think generally the proposals for unit mix and all those things are fine, except I think maybe we should just cap the 2 and 3 bedroom requirement at 50% and not have it slide upwards. Just, if you need a bonus, it's 50%. That's it. In this project, the marketplace parcel C, tonight we saw about 57% 2 and 3 bedroom units. So I think we've seen that mix is possible. But I don't, getting towards 60%, I think is seeming like a lot to me. So I still wouldn't, I wouldn't want to overly burden a project with that. Let's see, should residential bonus system be? Yeah, I think the 2-tier system is good. The only thing I would maybe throw out there is this 50% threshold, and then more than that in tier 2. Is that the right breakdown, or maybe we want the breakdown to be half your bonus has to come from one tier and half your bonus has to come from the other tier? I don't know. Then in any case, we would get, even if you needed a small bonus, we would get a small amount of each benefit. I don't know how that would work out, but that was just a thought that I had. Non-residential system seemed fine to me. Yeah, and the abbreviated list of benefits, I totally agree. I remember having concerns when we went through the planning regulations that there were some that just seemed kind of out there to me. So I agree with that. But I would just say in general, my concern, like Commissioner Keller and some others, I have a lot of concern about the base heights or the base limits and the bonus limits. I think, and FAR aside, because I can't get my head around that one, for the heights, as Commissioner Gunkel said, really need to be tied to construction types and what, reality and what people may want or not want to build. I think that if we want these bonuses, the base levels need to be undesirable. So we need to place them in such a way that it's not a height and not a density that people want to build. Now, the unintended consequence of that is that someone, may come along that wants to build it. And so, I don't know how you. That's why I say that they need to be at undesirable levels. I don't know if there needs to be a minimum levels as well to counter for unintended consequences. A minimum density, a minimum height, so that we, don't have someone that comes along and builds something that's undesirable in areas where we have envisioned more growth and more intensity. So I'm just throwing that out there for thought. Yeah, this whole discussion just makes me really nervous, as I think I've observed with other comments. There's not. I don't see a way to. There's no small failure. It's like a small failure is we come back. There are a few small unintended consequences. We come back and we fix the whole program and the ordinance, and that's a success because we're still getting what we want. I think if this is going to fail, it's going to fail big, and that is what makes me really nervous. I'm not. I think when I read through the staff report, everything makes sense. But I think as Commissioner Cardoza said, we need more economic analysis, because that's where all of this stops for me, is what, and I'm, I'm trying to kind of run through that in my head as I'm reading through this, but I just don't have the expertise to provide all of the information that I need. So that's sort of where I am.
Could I give my opinions on the questions? So on the discussion questions, I think the staff's summary of the direction of the Commission Council at the meeting was accurate. I just don't think we were able at that meeting to flesh out all the details of those things. So I still think that it's incomplete. The unit size, mix, design guidelines, and et cetera, I think that still needs work. I think on a lot of those things we're going a little overboard. I definitely like the direction we're going. And then before I get into any more questions, I really want to say I agree pretty much with the whole commission. I believe with Commissioner Gunkel, he went through everything very succinctly, and I really agreed with what everyone has said. I think the bonus system should definitely be a two-tiered. I don't know that the first 50 points should have to come from affordable. I kind of like Chair Moss's suggestion that 50-50 should come from each. Half of their bonus points should come from one level and half should come from the other, and how that works out, I think that gives us a little bit more flexibility, and I think it's going to give us better projects. So I do like that idea. So definitely the system should be two-tiered. I definitely agree. I think we did a good job, or the staff did a good job on reducing our list. I think the bonus point areas that we have are accurate and they're good. And I think it gets rid of a lot of duplications, and I think a lot of the other things should fold into our regular zoning ordinance and codes. So I think we're there. I just want to get on the whole reason that I actually met with Paul Weingartner at Gensler was at the request of, it was at a conversation from Councilmember Donahue and I, asking why we can't get better projects and taller projects. So I reached out to Gensler and they agreed to meet with me. And on the height issue, the whole thing is what he was telling me is that developers are going to build up to 75 feet because that's what they can build in a wood structure. Beyond that, they're not going to go any lower than 200 in this economy, especially in the East Bay. So there is no middle ground that a developer can actually feel that a steel building is going to pencil out. So for us, we're basically looking at 75-foot or 7-story structures. And I am very concerned with the downsizing. Let's just skip the whole bonus system, and I could totally see Sherman-Williams doing this and just say, you know what, we're going to build the whole project by right. And we're not going to give you the parks. We're not going to give you anything more than is required within the whole plan. And we're just going to build this. And we're going to have to allow them to do that. And we're going to have a very lousy project. And that's a true concern I have. I don't think that's going to be the case with the marketplace because they're a PUD and it might not, Sherman-Williams is our last prime site that we have. So I think as what everyone discussed is scaling down projects and getting something that's really substandard is something I'm very, very concerned about. And I agree, and I actually said it at the joint meeting, is I think 50% of the 2 and 3 bedroom units should meet family-friendly guidelines. If they do beyond that, they should have the flexibility. They should be able to be creative with what kind of spaces they do create. Because families today aren't the nuclear mother, father, and 2 kids as it used to be. It's a lot of single moms. So I think if we can come creative space that makes a space work better for a single mom, let the developers do that. That's their job. I don't think we should tie their hands and say, no, they'll have to follow these particular guidelines. So I think I agree with Commissioner Donaldson on that. And at that, I'll shut up.
Could I ask for just a couple of clarification? You say 50% of 2 and 3 bedrooms should be family friendly. Do you mean that if 50% of units are required to be 2 or more bedroom, then 25% would be required to be family friendly?
No, it's what we have discussed, that if you're doing, if they're required to make 50% of their things 2 and 3 bedrooms, those have to meet family friendly guidelines.
But if they provide more, they shouldn't have to be.
They shouldn't have to follow that.
Yeah, I agree.
And
with
I
that
understand the part that Jennifer West is saying that, we could do this to try to make up for lost time. I don't think that's something we can do at this point. I think we have to move forward with what we can do, because we're going to end up making these things so expensive we get nothing. So we're not only not going to make up for lost time, we're going to get nothing more. So we have to cut our losses.
I just want to make one observation about Sherwin-Williams. They also are a PUD.
They're PUD also, yeah.
And they don't get to build just whatever they want. The commission and the city council have to approve whatever design is is, going to go on that site. So it's going to have to satisfy you, or they're not going to get their entitlements. Just to reassure you.
Through
Good to know.
and through a PUD, I mean, you can create greater density and greater heights in certain areas, and I mean that's the whole the whole idea behind it. So there's still that flexibility.
So, are we done?
Do you feel you have sufficient direction?
I would like to sum up, if I may, and I have to say, despite the fact that I sense a lot of trepidation about all of this, and that it's complicated, and it's, hornet's nest, and how can we possibly sort all this out, I heard a lot of consensus, I think, from all of you tonight. It wasn't necessarily what was said at the May 2nd meeting, but I think what I heard is 50% 2 and 3 bedroom and 10% 3 bedroom and more is okay, is good, but we shouldn't require more than that, and not, for bonus or anything. That should just be the base requirement. That more than that number of units of 2 or 3 bedroom units should not necessarily be required to be family friendly. Let's see, what else did I hear?
The one thing I didn't say is I believe the base system should stay the same. And if we do make any changes, 1/3 is the most I could support. But I'd like to see it stay
Oh,
as
that's
it
good
is.
to hear.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Good to have a nice number like that. So you're saying 1/3 below the bonus level.
Right, but I'd rather it stay the same.
So in other words, if the
Correct.
bonus level is 100, then the base should be at least 67,
Correct.
for example.
Correct.
But I don't think we have consensus on that.
No.
I've heard varying things about the base level, that maybe it should be dropped, but maybe not as much as we're saying it should be dropped. I hear some.
I'd like
Well,
to
you were
see
saying
that.
it should be dropped more.
I think, I could go either way. I'm either all in or I'm folding on this one. I
Okay.
think it should be either kept where it is or dropped way down. Like there's none of this middle ground.
I didn't hear too much about the ownership housing. The guidelines, the unit mix, that all seemed to be okay. I hear support for a 2-tier system, I guess for both residential and non-residential. I heard
And
also...
I like later on, Sean, others started tossing around the idea that the 2-tiered system might not need to start with the initial 50.
Right, that
I
it's
that,
like
yeah.
one from column A and one from column B kind of thing. Half of the
Half
bonus
or so.
points from the affordable housing and the other half from community benefits.
No preference one ahead of the other, all right?
Well, if you went the way that's suggested, that you'd have to do both.
You'd have to do both anyway.
Yeah, I think the
What-
affordability needs to be
Yes,
in
it's
there.
a key factor.
Needs to be.
Yeah, the only question is it all affordable for the first 50 points and then other things, or is it just half affordable for the whole thing?
So I think what I was suggesting, and again, I haven't fleshed this all out, but for example, if you needed a bonus of 30, then 15 points would have to come from affordable and 15 would have to come from whatever,
Yeah.
the other column, the ones you get to pick.
That's
That's
right.
what I
I mean,
agree
I
with.
think it should even be more flexible, that 15 should, if you needed 30, you could do 15 affordable and 15 of something else wonderful, or you could do 30 of affordable, because I think affordable.
But a minimum of
Yeah.
affordability should be 50% of what you do.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting nuance.
Yeah.
But yeah, that could work.
Because, yeah, I mean, I do
like
think that the affordability is the most important one of these things, so I
Yeah.
think that needs to be the priority.
And I heard support for our proposed streamlined list of community benefit categories. Let's see. Any other major? I also heard we need to do some economic analysis of all of this, which
Yes.
is going to be a challenge. I don't disagree, not at all, but it is going to be a challenge to do that and try to meet
The deadlines.
timeline that the council expects.
So I'm thinking the timelines are too fast.
Really? Just had a developer offer to show us his pro forma. That never happens.
Oh, wow. Do we get that on tape?
They must be serious.
They're willing to help.
All right, I think that's pretty good direction. We'll go forward and see where we go from here. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. All right. So with that, I think we just have commissioner comments.